ReD Book 1 The Dark Pale Perspective. Written and performed by Lashley-Johnstone. Chapter 16 Run Dream Run. Part 1. Danica stirred as the sudden dreamward flashes commenced due to sudden enveloping exhaustion took hold. This was one of those times when she knew what was going on. Other times, most of the time, she had no control. If she was honest with herself, she barely ever felt like she was in control. But this time, the situation that she was now in was clearly affecting her subconscious. There was a faint smell of dust in the room she was now running through, like the corridors hadn't sounded the echoes of rushing human feet for years, perhaps centuries. She was on hallowed ground, but she didn't know where. She was running away from something, which put a bit of a downer on the control she had previously felt. But she was strong. She was strong and she was fast. And maybe she wasn't running away, maybe she was running towards something. A safe haven she knew would fall into her eye line any minute. Maybe she was luring, not fleeing. There was a sound of something behind her, and it was picking up speed. It wasn't a man or a woman. It was a monster. A monster that she couldn't let touch her. If it touched her, she would die. That, more than her sense of righteousness, was what drove her forward. She felt the adrenaline surge round her system. What was that smell? Dampness? Was she underground? She looked down at her feet pounding on the floor. The ground was wet. As she continued down the corridor, it became damper, more slippery. She felt on top of things seconds ago, but the damp floor made her feel as if she was toppling. She looked behind her. The thing was pursuing her on 4 legs. It was an animal. A jaguar, maybe. Some sort of big cat. Its teeth gleamed in the darkness that came and went as the cat passed by the windows, from which sunlight streamed, illuminating the dust that billowed and dissipated as the beast picked up speed. Danica looked ahead, concentrating on putting some distance between this creature and herself. She noticed some sort of barrier that she knew she would hit in a matter of seconds. A hurdle. A hurdle she cleared as some sort of automatic thought. She flew and landed comfortably, rolling to her left in the process where she had seen a set of stairs milliseconds before she jumped. She took off down the stairs. Scampering, skipping steps and bouncing off the walls for stability, she curved round in the shape of a downward spiral. What was she doing? How was she doing this? It was a dream, but it felt like a representation of some part of her life. The sound of the beast's roar cascaded down the spiral staircase. When would this end? Where did this lead? She didn't even know. Going down seemed like a good idea at the time, but the dampness. She was already underground, and she had foreknowledge of that somehow. So why was she continuing in that direction? She would surely come into contact with whatever was making the floor damp. There had been no drips from above. The wet stain looked like it came from underneath, and was seeping through to the surface. Her fears were confirmed as the staircase came to a sudden end. She only noticed at the last second, and had no time to stop herself from flying into the water. The horrible taste hit her mouth that she also didn't have time to close. Because she was already breathless from running at such a pace down the stairs, she had no time to take a breath. So when she breathed in, the dirty, disgusting water was forced down her throat in large gulps. She rose above the waterline, spluttering and choking in what must have been sewage water. The pitter-patter of paws and the scampering of sharp claws came from above. The sound was muffled thanks to the water in her ears. She had no time to let her lack of air stop her. She took in the biggest breath she could before exploding into another coughing fit. She started wading through the water, forcing her legs through the muck and using her arms to paddle, occasionally lifting one to wipe the water out of her eyes that was streaming down from her hair. Her hair. She glanced in mid-wade and saw that it was long and black, like it had been when she was a little girl. Although she didn't feel like a little girl, she felt older and wiser than she remembered feeling on a normal day. The fear she expected, but the strength she did not. The water seemed to carry on forever from what she could see. Danica knew she couldn't turn back. Although she felt stronger, she knew she would still get ripped apart by whatever was chasing her. The roar had stopped, and she stopped, listening, trying to quietly clear her ears of water. Where was the beast? Had she lost it? No. It was close. She could feel it in her gut. She moved quietly amid the water. She couldn't keep standing still, though if the beast was still there with her, which it could be, she would give away her position. It was toying with her, and that made her angry. A sudden bright light came from her right. She was blinded and immediately apprehensive. She saw a figure step into the light, the shadow reflecting on the rocks that she could now see all around her. Suddenly she felt dizzy. She wobbled and fell into the water. She was no longer bothered about breathing, about the taste of the liquid, about the beast. Her energy had flooded from her, almost making the water feel warmer than it had on first contact. She felt a hand come into contact with hers. She smiled as she recognized how that hand felt. She drifted in the hand's direction slightly, let the water wash over her face. The muck was dissolving. The dream state she was in was leaving her. She woke. The white light similar to the one in the dream shining down on her face from directly above. The shadow, smaller now, with the head shape eclipsing the light slightly. "Sweetie," said the eclipse, "you with us?" The light dimmed as she became more aware of her surroundings. Arkham was staring down at her, with a half-smile on his face. "How long was I out for?" asked Danica, rubbing her eyes, not yet sitting upright. "Only just 30 minutes. You passed out on the bed while I was getting coffee. I'm surprised you didn't crash sooner." "I'm sorry. Did I miss anything?" "I've got your gear," Arkham said, laying the various cases he was carrying on one of the tables beside him. And as he did so, the door he had seemingly just stepped through slid closed automatically. Danica was by no means fully awake yet. Slightly dazed, she stretched her shoulders as she always did when she woke up, and focused her eyes on Arkham. He had changed from when Danica had seen him last, and had clearly been at his face with the razor, in the normal way, his few-day growth now extinguished. His skin was lighter than Danica originally had thought. There was definitely some ethnic blood in there, somewhere, but Danica hadn't really thought about it. The lights above their heads were bright, and Danica now saw his green, sunken eyes, reflecting. His short, blackish-brown hair now slightly groomed, the scar on his left temple that had always been there, but that Danica could now not fail to notice, now more prominent under the hairline. As she looked down at what Arkham had laid on the table, the public persona mode she presented day to day dissipated. In her time she had come across gear like this. Sourcing out and editing equipment for different prospective clients was her living, after all. But she had only seen pieces. It was rare to see all the moving parts working in harmony, and with all the technological bugs removed, the RISC command interface properly installed. As she scanned harder with her eyes, she noticed how light it looked. Weight was a massive issue when it came to working combat armor. Danica had come across them in her time, and she could see that Arkham was watching her scan his attire and the things on the table. She knew that he could see the sense of recognition in her eyes, a look that she tried to hide day to day, playing ignorant most of the time. But now was not the time for ignorance. "No way!" she exclaimed. Is that what I think it is?" As she said this, there was a hissing sound behind her, and Martin Baldwin stepped into the room, clearly ready to interject. "Modified titanium-dipped tri-wave fiber armor?" he said, looking somewhat smug. "Yeah." Danica moved over to where Arkham had laid the equipment, gazing with a wonderful mix of recognition and awe. "I've never seen all of these parts so close together. They're all manufactured so far apart from each other to avoid theft." "Did you steal it?" Martin grunted. "Like you would, you mean?" "Don't make assumptions, Marty," Arkham said. "Nope, he's right. I would have stolen it," she said. "Couldn't afford that in a million years. How'd you get it?" "It's classified," Martin said. "Are you really going to pull that one on me? If I know what it does, then I'm allowed to know where you got it, right?" "She's got a point," Arkham said. "What does it do, then?" Martin trailed off. "Danica," she hissed. "That's right," Martin smiled, and it wasn't a smile that Danica liked. She cleared her throat and began. "The plating's impressive, but it's what's in between the layers of armor that's interesting. The fluid in between the layers of the plating harden in response to impact, both close combat and short and long-range gunfire depending on where you're standing. The shock absorption is good for counterattacks especially, and the liquid fiber is a hell of a lot more light and flexible. I take it we'll be doing a lot of running. There was a short silence, and the smug look on Martin's face was now transferred to Arkham's, along with a slight smile that made Martin grit his teeth. "Shall I go on?" Danica added, somewhat gleefully. "No need," Martin said, now stepping fully into the room. Although Danica stopped talking aloud about the armor she was now lifting off the table and examining more closely in the light, now somehow no longer caring about where it came from, she continued in her head. The armor looked like modified ceramic plating, with black and red tints that covered the torso and down the arms in a zigzag format. The trousers were the same, and Danica could now see the woven-in tri-weave fibers, no doubt for freedom of movement. The weapons she remembered him picking out earlier were all strapped to Arkham's body now. "So, I get gear." "That's nice. And it's practical, too. I hope Martin didn't think I was entering that place in a classic Wonder Woman outfit," Danica said, turning round and winking at Martin. "Please, God, no," he said, in a way that demonstrated malice. Arkham noticed this and sighed. "Well, you can't go to D.C. as you are. Well, you know." Danica folded her arms tightly. "All what?" she said. "All exposed and stuff." "Exposed and stuff? Really?" Arkham moved to the laptop behind him and began tapping keys. "We don't know what the hell we're expecting when we get into the city. The coverage of the area went dead less than half an hour ago. That's why I dug this stuff out, and that's why we're leaving now." "We must be pretty close to the deadline now, right?" said Danica, stepping out of sight of the two men in the room. "You said 10 hours. We're not going to get there in time." Arkham sighed again. "It turns out that was just a warning shot, to fire across the throats of the politicians, possibly to provoke quarantine, and I guess it worked. You saw those tweets." Danica frowned. "But the deadline isn't up yet. Are you saying they changed it?" Arkham scratched his head. "There was a message that came through just before the live news feed went dead. You were asleep. It was just recycling some stuff about the lockdown, and then the screen went all, you know." "Blank and hackerish?" Danica called out, struggling with the armor. "Yeah, pretty much." "What did the message say?" Danica asked. "Was it a recording? Letters, maybe?" "It was a spoken message." "Did you see who it was?" Half-dressed, Danica came back into the room, now carrying the boots she could tell were going to take an age to put on. Arkham's green eyes darkened as he nodded. "Yeah, and it wasn't just us that saw it. I checked the numbers. It's gone out. It's been taken down and re-uploaded thousands of times in the last 20 minutes alone." Danica asked the burning question. "Who was it?" The laptop bleeped as the message file came through on the submission platform that was the foundation of Arkham and, she guessed, Martin Baldwin's custom operating system. "I had Marty rip the video and put it on the SP. We're going to need to verify this for authenticity on the move." Danica strode forward and pressed play on the screen. The face that she saw in the next second made her freeze. There were so many reasons why. Some immediate questions that scared her no end. Others faint memories that had haunted her dreams every night for years. As she listened to the voice she knew so well, it came out of the wall speakers and echoed across the room as the sound travelled. His words cut deep into her soul, scraping at it, digging out her pride and her pain. "Oh my God," she gasped, as the lips, moist with sweat, continued moving. The voice continued reverberating around the room. There was no reply for several seconds. "I know," Arkham said, eventually. "I'm preparing for the worst. But we need to move." The message cut off. Danica focused her mind as much as she could on the mission in front of her. She looked down at the boots on the floor beneath her. "Have I got to put these on?" "It'll be worth it, and probably quite necessary. I promise," Arkham said. They'll protect you. They're somewhat comfortable, and they're your size. I checked. Danica looked uncertain. Okay, she said, reluctantly. But you're going to have to give me some pointers if we run into trouble. Arkham smiled. Well, they say the best training you can receive is out in the field. You better watch my back, though, she said, pointing at him and returning the smile. The smile was for him, to reassure him, not for her. What she had just seen on that laptop screen filled her with more fear and confusion than anything she'd experienced in the last few hours. The man on the screen. The man that said things that she knew would end their way of life unless they acted quickly. The man that had driven the country back into depression. The man who had held so much promise but now embodied pure evil. The now probably former President of the United States, Doug Harrison. Chapter 17. Force of Habit. Part 1. He couldn't remember who sang the song. Hungry people don't stay hungry for long. They get hope from the fire and smoke as they reach for the dawn. Those words rang in the ears of Billy Brown as he shifted in his uncomfortable plastic seat that sat behind the counter in the diner on the route of the I-95 that led into Philadelphia, then New Jersey, and the other way to Washington, D.C. His head was pounding relentlessly, a result of a 2-day bender he had stuck to religiously on every payday of the month. That bender also always made him find himself in this interstate diner. This hangover that tended to last for 2 days at a time was not a feeling he was unfamiliar with. But today, it felt over 5 times worse. It was the absinthe that he had been forced to drink in the bar the night before by one of his antisocial acquaintances by the name of Emmanuel Devora. He had convinced Billy to drink something that it took a while to explain to the bartender. That alone sent alarm bells ringing in Billy's head. Or was it the techno music that surrounded him that night? He couldn't remember. Billy thought of techno as the soundtrack to a life on repeat. And it was, like a broken record, never being able to move forward. Just skipping back, almost making it over the damaged area, and then shutting down altogether. Fuck, grunted Billy, massaging his left temple incessantly. He was a big man. There was no denying that. He had been called Big Bone as a child, a name that had stuck through college, and now through his work life. He had dropped out of college due to a bad breakup in his senior year, something that so many people would want to clip him behind the ear for, including his own mother. But it was a decision that Billy had thought long and hard about, weighing up the pros and cons. He couldn't stay because they shared a course, and his sister, Monica, shared a dorm with her, which made things worse. That was how Billy and this girl had met. They fell in love and were inseparable for months throughout their senior year. But that had all changed when she had turned 21. The first mishap occurred on the night of her birthday celebration. She had been seen by one of Billy's friends locking mouths with a stranger in the corner of the room, while Billy was away buying her more drinks. The club they were all in was densely populated, and so Billy hadn't been able to see her through the crowd of rowdy, young college students, who were all shouting so loud that Billy was concentrating more than anything else on being heard by the barman. The girl Billy was with was picky and particular, things that at first he had found attractive in her. But when alcohol was ingested, she started revealing the somewhat negative side of her quirky personality, constantly demonstrating to the rest of the world how she liked things done, more than one step too far. At that moment, in that party, what she had wanted was to show everyone how she liked to be kissed by another man she barely knew. Something that she denied doing the following morning. Billy may even have been able to let it go if it had been the first night of her proper drinking, but, like many students, 21 was just a number when it came to alcohol. She had recounted several incidences of alcohol-fueled hilarity in her life so far. They had been funny and entertaining to all the people she had told them to. When Billy thought back on it now, it was probably all bullshit, because the problem with regurgitating your stories over and over, getting words passed around about who did what, with who, when, where, and how many times, etc., is that it all makes her sound like an experienced drinker. Billy remembered his sister asking her whether she had ever got hangovers or blacked out before. She didn't, which made sense to Billy at the time because she always was able to remember all her stories in so much detail. Stories told almost entirely from her perspective, barely any second-hand information included or required. So when it came to the time of confrontation, her maintaining that she had no memory, Billy hadn't believed a word of it. His anger seething and palpable. They had temporarily split up for a couple of days, reconciling at a party that they were both invited to. They both knew they had to show face, and so they ended up talking it out. It was what happened next that had ended his days at college. Billy found Guy's clothes hidden underneath her shoes at the bottom of their shared wardrobe. They didn't belong to Billy, so he questioned her, when the silence said more than she would ever be able to say out loud. It came out later that she had at least 2 guys back at her dorm when Billy's sister wasn't there for whatever reason. They had to scuttle in the morning, and so she had hidden their clothes with the intention of returning them, so as to cover her tracks. Because Billy and his sister came from money, and he had made a decent amount extra lobbying for the government, not in vain, he had money to burn. In the weeks that followed the separation, he ate and drank a lot, putting on weight at a rate so fast he could almost feel his veins thinning. He ate to comfort himself. He drank to drown the sorrows. Classic. But what was far less fortunate was that the alcohol had caused many of his own drunken encounters with women he barely knew. This wasn't a moral issue for him. In his mind, he had done the college relationship, he was working now, he had money, and he was single. The one girl who he had hooked up with had telephoned him days later, however, saying the words, "You should get yourself tested." And that was it. He was HIV positive. His life's decline speed increased exponentially. The weight piled on, the drunken nights continued, hookups not included. Now he sat in a shitty little diner, his money gone, almost, his pride bruised and battered beyond repair. The news was on in the top left-hand corner of one of the walls above where Billy was sitting. The screen flashed up images of the sudden capital quarantine procedures. Billy tensed. He was from DC. His homesickness suddenly kicked in. What was going on in there? The TV was on mute, so all Billy was able to see and hear were the live pictures on the screen, some recycled ones as well, the hum of the generator buzzing not far away, and the anchorman's miming lips, looking steadily and steadily more dry as he spoke. His family. He needed to get to his family. Billy knew he was dying, knew he wouldn't live to see the next few years. If he was going to do something meaningful with his life now, after dropping out of college for a reason that in the end he could have worked through, it was to protect his own. He headed out of the diner quickly to the outer car park. His rusty Cadillac was the only car there, a car he had purchased after reading his HIV/AIDS test results. Billy figured that he could gain some sort of kinship with something that was also on its last legs. Plus, the car felt as if it had some history, and it gave him something to ponder while driving. He lit a cigarette as he fumbled for his keys with his other hand. He squeezed his bulk into the old, rusted car, coming into contact with a plethora of cigarette ends in the process. Smoking was a habit he had picked up in the last year or so. He had an addictive personality to some extent, which helped none when he was already doomed. He started the engine. The car coughed and spluttered as Billy hammered on the gas pedal. The transfer box was leaking petrol into the car, and had been for a couple of weeks. He took another long drag on the cigarette. Billy must have had a death wish. The Cadillac spluttered, then begrudgingly sprang into life. Sweating, seething, this time with fear and a hint of resignation, Billy drove, making his way out of the diner's parking lot, back onto the I-95, heading for home. Heading for disaster. Chapter 18 Force of Habit Part 2. The man in black and purple, who had been sitting in the corner of the interstate diner for a full 20 minutes now, grinned. Grinned his signature grin. The position he was now in made him feel powerful. The element of surprise was what made his adrenaline pump through his veins. The fact that his target had no idea what was going to enter his life so that he could leave it behind. The man in black and purple needed to kill. Sometimes. Needed, in the way a drug addict needs another fix. The man liked captions. Ever since he was a young boy, he had enjoyed graffiti. He would paint his thoughts, sometimes a paragraph, sometimes one word, on all of his victims and most of his friends. If not on the bodies themselves, then their possessions. Possessions that maybe the victim's family would find weeks after the fact, defaced, damaged, ruined. That was what the man in black and purple did on his days off. He ruined, and he had his reasons. It came from what the man assumed was a logical place, but a man with a personality like his never bothered asking questions like that. He just sometimes needed to make the kills. If he didn't, sometimes, then he had no purpose. And that was the worst crime in life, that was committed on purpose or sometimes completely by accident. Having no purpose was the only crime this man could not tolerate. He had been in the diner for a full 15 minutes before he saw his target arriving through the double doors. His target didn't know he was being targeted, which made the man in black and purple's task much easier and more fun. He gazed at what would be his 15th victim as he wobbled his girth into his seat. "I'm not as funny as you look." He said this to himself quietly, giggling. He had a newspaper held incognito style in front of his face. The man in black and purple giggled again as he peeked over the edge, not loud enough to be heard by the big man, his target. The man in black and purple watched his target eat and drink with a lust that went deeper than the taste buds, much deeper. It was a desire to fill a void, and the part-time killer, part-time savior, knew which void. The void of self-pity for his condition. The part-time killer liked to research the people he would stalk, for reasons only known to him. Learning all their dirty secrets, their lies, their medical history, things like that. He looked at the eyes of the man he was preparing to take from this world. He saw crepuscular light within them. And the man's last thought as he walked past his target, out the back entrance, and round to the car, squatting in the parking lot, lockpicks to hand, making sure to stay out of sight, was that he wanted to see that light die. And the best part, the owner of that car, the big man, would never know why. And why should he? It was absolutely none of his business.